Everybody, welcome back to the Wisdom Nutrition Podcast. This is Alex Sacken, and today we are going to be moving into the finale of this long multi-part series on the secret history of the 20th century. And I actually have split this finale into two parts. This is part 10 of the overall series, and then it's going to be followed with a part 11. So this article is called The Black Budget and the Technocratic Superstate, and then the follow-up is called The UFO, A Symbol of Initiation. And I've been working weeks on these two articles because they're so important to the overall, not only chapter that we've been doing here in the 20th century, but also this overall book project that I've been laying out over the past year and a half called Philosophy, Its Origin, Purpose, and Destiny. And each of these long series I've been doing on these different themes are all chapters in a book, basically, and that's the book, the book on philosophy. So in this article and the next, I'm going to try to not only tie everything together that we've been going over in this chapter on the 20th century, but also integrate all this past material that's very important. So I, took the time to go over, the history of America and Francis Bacon and all that in order to really inform our understanding of modern events and the world as it is today and the world as it could be in the future. So that's really my goal here, is to bring that past material back and let it now inform us about the world today. And so that's the goal here. So without further ado, I want to get into the article itself. This is once again called The Black Budget and the Technocratic Superstate, and I'll explain what I mean by both of those as we go through the article. But this first section is called The Secret Destiny of America Revisited. And here I'm going to be explicitly referencing some of the material that we went over in our earlier coverage of Francis Bacon and on the secret history of America. And so without further ado, let's get into it. All right, let's jump into the article. This first section is called The Secret Destiny of America Revisited. And here I'm going to be tying in elements not only from this whole series on the 20th century, but also our previous series on America and on Francis Bacon. So I'm going to try to link these all together. I'm also very much going to be referencing in this article the idea of the caste system, which I first laid out in part 6 of my series on the philosophy of mandalas, which was on this idea that world civilization itself is a mandala, and the caste system, the 4 tiers of it, integrate with that idea. And so now I'm going to be revisiting that idea and applying it to the 20th century to say that, or to show how we need this concept of the caste system in order to make sense of what's happening in the world today and how power is structured in modern society. So anyway, let's get into it. This article marks the beginning of a 2-part finale to a long multi-part series on the topic of the secret history of the 20th century. For reasons of length, I have broken this finale up into 2 sections. The first is titled The Black Budget and the Technocratic Superstate, and the second is called The UFO, A Symbol of Initiation. I wrote both together and intend them to be paired as a single document. The content presented in these 2 articles builds directly off the material covered previously in Part 9 of this series, which discussed how the Cold War was an engineered conflict designed from the start to mask 2 covert objectives: the creation of a global American empire and the build-out of a permanent black projects infrastructure within the U.S. national security state. The Cold War masked America's pursuit of these 2 covert objectives by first supporting the rise of a permanent war economy within America, and second by justifying the expansion of America's military presence around the world. The real purpose of these motions was not to fight the communist threat in Soviet Russia. This was a staged cover story. The real purpose was to create an empire backed by a top-secret arsenal of covert black projects. The empire formed within America under the guise of the Cold War is one that extends in 2 dimensions, one vertically, the other horizontally. On the vertical axis, America's empire is concerned with spreading its reach around the world, creating vassal states out of its various nations. In large part, this is accomplished through America's control over the global economic system, something the petrodollar financial order works to facilitate. Through the global petrodollar system, American banks and corporations are able to secretly funnel vast amounts of money and resources back into America. These are distributed across the vast hierarchy of departments, command structures, and covert operations units, which together form the vertical dimension of American empire. So you see the vertical dimension has to do with this power structure, and then the horizontal dimension has to do with the global extent of this empire that is being run. So you see the vertical and horizontal dimensions. This vertical dimension of American empire references not only the hierarchy of political, economic, and military leaders who govern the U.S.'s global imperial system, but also the unseen power structure responsible for running America's hidden matrix of covert black projects, which are carried out within the inner depths of the U.S. national security state. While it is all but impossible for any outsider to know fully what the lay of the land looks like within this secret black project's realm, evidence suggests that it is essentially managed by an elite think tank of scientists and engineers. This is the same pattern that existed in Nazi Germany during the war, where a secret black project's empire was essentially managed by an elite coordinating body of scientists and planners called the Kammlerstab. Concealed within the heart of the American national security state is a new updated version of this Kammlerstab program, with a central think tank overseeing a vast matrix of black projects. Together, I call this structure the Technocratic Superstate. Since its birth after World War II, the Technocratic Superstate is the real driver of American empire. But it is a mysterious entity, its operations concealed behind an impenetrable wall of secrecy. It works something like the human nervous system, with the think tank at its core functioning somewhat like a brain, with various appendages extending down from it to reach into all other parts of the social organism, which it systematically works to take control of. The method of the technocracy is not to overthrow the pre-existing power structure within America, but to quietly co-opt it and take control of it. This means taking control not only of the outer democratic institutions of society, but also of the capitalist system the oligarchy rules over, which, as we covered in early articles of this series, rose and grew dominant within America over the course of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This means that the economic and political institutions that the oligarchy had previously gained control of in America are ones that the technocracy has gradually usurped for itself. In the meantime, because the technocratic superstate remains secret, the oligarchy and the institutions of capitalism they control may not even be aware that they are now being controlled by this new scientific power structure. We're calling back to the idea that American empire has both vertical and horizontal dimensions. The technocratic superstate sits at the apex of the empire's vertical dimension, where it oversees the build-out of the American empire's horizontal spread around the world. Thinking in terms of the old caste system, the public, the oligarchy, and the technocratic superstate form three distinct castes. Each is locked on a level, and American empire arises as the integration of all three. And actually, I'll be adding a fourth to this coming up. The technocracy is responsible for planning the empire and developing the technologies that run it. The oligarchy, meanwhile, is responsible for running the economic system that the empire depends on. The lowest of these castes, the outer public, its democratic institutions having long since been captured, has very little say in anything, its role being to assimilate itself into the world order these greater power structures are creating. The long-term end state that the technocratic superstate is driving America towards is to catalyze the birth of a formal system of world government, one that it will one day play a central role in managing. As we explored in the early articles of this chapter, the American oligarchy also desires a world system, but one built on different terms. Its desired world order is one built around its control over the instruments of capitalism. After World War II, this oligarchical agenda became co-opted by the newly formed technocratic superstate. Now, the final world order to be created is not a capitalistic one ruled by bankers and corporate executives, but rather a technocratic one governed by an elite central think tank of scientists and engineers. So as you remember, the oligarchy had, since the days of the British Empire and back even to Venice, they had planned to create a global economic system that they would be the central sort of controllers over as the central bankers. But now, after World War II, as things move in this direction of science and technology, that whole economic order and the economic system becomes sort of co-opted by this larger scientific apparatus. And so, the economic system isn't wiped out, but it's now re-engineered and used as an instrument of this larger scientific body. So the oligarchs are still there, and to an extent, they may even think that they're still running the show because this technocracy is very secret. But in reality, all the systems that they're using in the banking system and stuff is no longer run really on a capitalist logic. Instead, it's really engineered in almost a scientific manner by this greater secret entity. And that, I think, it helps explain why our economic system doesn't make any sense from a capitalistic standpoint. It's not even really capitalist. It's a centrally managed, centrally controlled, sort of cartel-oriented structure. And so, the foundations and the skeleton structure of that was built out by the oligarchy over the course of hundreds of years. But since World War II, this new player, this technocracy, has emerged over top of the oligarchy and is now controlling it. So the technocratic superstate controls the oligarchy, and then the oligarchy in turn controls the outer public. And that's how these three tiers work. It's like a pyramid. The technocratic superstate's power is derived from the monopoly it holds on exotic paradigms of science and technology, which it develops in secret by means of a vast ecosystem of black projects, which are essentially controlled by its core think tank. Because it holds exclusive control over the most important and powerful technologies known to man, this secret scientific body, since forming after World War II, has risen to immediately become the new dominant power in global affairs. The mission of this technocracy is threefold. First, to develop a portfolio of secret technologies. Second, to install a global information control grid whose purpose is to protect and conceal these secret technologies. And third, its purpose is to re-engineer the trajectory of U.S. empire, driving it toward the ultimate end state of global government. So that's the threefold mandate. I'm going to be going back over this as we continue. But that's important to keep in mind, that there's this threefold mandate at the heart of technocracy. The idea behind its quest for global government is that a formal system of world governance and security protection before its secret arsenal of exotic technologies can finally be publicly revealed and put to use. The global governance system that the technocracy seeks to implement is one where all peoples and nations will be fitted together to form one uniformly integrated system of world civilization, with war being eliminated as an inevitable consequence. And this is the key factor, is that you can't have these technologies come out in a world where, major geopolitical conflicts are still taking place. The elimination of war is the necessary factor that must first come about before the breakthrough technologies the technocracy possesses can ever be revealed and put to use to transform world society. The idea of transforming world society is something we've encountered before. It was the central mission of Francis Bacon's Rosicrucian order back in the 17th century. This brings us to an important point. Behind the three caste levels of the public, the oligarchy, and the technocracy exists a fourth level, one personified by Francis Bacon's secret society. This fourth level is what I've sometimes referred to as the hidden hand. In esoteric philosophy, it is also commonly called the mystery schools. In my analysis, this mystery school sits at the top of the world pyramid, operating above, behind, and through the lower castes, including most notably the technocratic superstate. Overall, 4 levels are revealed, with this mystery school occupying the apex position of the global caste system. Below this elite secret society is the entity I've been calling the technocratic superstate. Below this is the oligarchy, and below them is the outer body of public society. As we just discussed, in the esoteric lineage of the West, the secret operations of the mystery schools are tightly linked with the work of 17th century philosopher Francis Bacon and the secret society he was master over, the Rosicrucian order. One of the primary goals of Bacon's secret society, based in England but with branches extending into the European continent, was to set the stage for the transformation of world civilization, bringing it out of the age of church and crown and into a new age of science and republican democracy. Another goal of this central society was to transition its base of operations from England to America, where in the future it would serve as the secret custodian of the scientific age. As we covered in our earlier chapter on America, Francis Bacon's secret society, sometimes called the Invisible College, was brought over to America at the very beginning of England's colonization scheme. Once established in America, this secret society worked behind the scenes to orchestrate the American Revolution. This story is well established and by now relatively well known. The real question is, what happened to this society after the Revolutionary era? Once the American nation was formed, where did this secret society go? It seems that, with the rise of the industrial age, which took place not long after the nation's founding, the orientation of Bacon's secret society shifted from a political and religious focus to a scientific and industrial one. Having been victorious in its quest to replace the church and crown with a new era of science and democracy, the mission of Bacon's secret society shifted. Now its goal would be to guide world civilization through the trials and tribulations of the industrial age. In my view, Francis Bacon's secret society is the real guiding force behind the secret history of the 20th century. This is the true hidden hand, one working over top, within, and through the technocratic superstate, an entity it worked diligently to set up and create over the first half of the 20th century. Through the technocratic superstate it has created and taken control of, Francis Bacon's invisible college has positioned itself to secretly direct the long-term evolution of world society, steering it toward the fulfillment of a long-envisioned end state, one Plato called the philosophic empire, and Francis Bacon the new Atlantis. This is the conclusion I have come to regarding what the secret history of the 20th century tells us. It is the key idea that binds the content of this entire chapter together. The main takeaway I hope you'll retain is to understand that the mystery schools and esoteric orders of the past remain alive and well today. Today, they govern the world temple from a secret vantage point nested deep within the inner architecture of the technocratic superstate. Here, the invisible college works in secret to bring about the conditions for the eventual birth of the new Atlantis, representing a new golden age. The achievement of this golden age is the evolutionary end state that human civilization has been driven to fulfill since the very beginning. One day we are destined to achieve this ideal, and at this present moment we are on the cusp of a major breakthrough toward it. Alright, so that's the end of this first section. Once again, that was called The Secret Destiny of America Revisited. So I wanted to go over that right at the beginning of the article because I think it's important, as we now will go further into our exploration of this technocratic superstate, to understand that it exists within a larger context. And this larger context is on one hand the caste system, but on the other hand it's also the existence of the mystery schools and the sort of secret societies and what their plan, their long-term plan for human civilization is. And this is a plan that we've been tracking over the course of thousands of years during the earlier chapters of this book. So now we're going to be looking at how this grand plan has been manifesting in modern life and in our modern historical circumstance. All right, let's move on. The next section is called the modern caste system, and now I'm going to go deeper into an analysis of these four levels, and in particular how the technocratic superstate fits at that third level of the caste system. So this section is going to be playing a lot on the material I presented in the earlier article on world civilization as a mandala from months and months ago. And so now we're going to be applying what we started developing there to understanding modern life. All right, picking back up, the modern caste system. The model of human history I've been building over the course of this multi-part series on the secret history of the 20th century is one based around the idea that human civilization innately self-organizes around the contours of a four-tiered caste system. The idea that human society is innately and archetypally organized into a caste system is one I first introduced in part 6 of my earlier series on the philosophy of mandalas in an article titled World Civilization as a Mandala. The idea here is that the four primary elements of alchemy, earth, water, fire, and air, are together reflected into the structure of human civilization in the form of this four-tiered caste system. Here, earth becomes labor, or just more broadly, public society in general. Water becomes the aristocracy, or as I've been calling the oligarchy. Fire becomes the state. And then the air element becomes the philosophers and intelligentsia. A fifth element, ether, also exists. This represents the ever-present existence of a transcendent spiritual institution called the mystery school, which oversouls and guides the long-term trajectory of human civilization. The mystery school draws initiates from each of the four lower castes, although its primary instrument is the caste of philosophers and intellectuals that together embodies the element air. In its ideal form, this fourth caste, the philosophers, are intended to serve the mystery schools by teaching its chosen doctrine of wisdom teachings, bringing these teachings out to the lower castes in a form that they can understand and benefit from. In this way, the philosophers serve as the primary agents and ambassadors of the mysteries. Originally, in the old days, the four elements of the caste system were integrated seamlessly together, with the fifth element, the spiritual elders behind the mystery schools, serving as the instrument of cohesion, binding them all together. But over the course of the Kali Yuga, where mankind descends into an age of materiality and egotism, the mystery schools, the crucial fifth element, disappeared from public view. As a consequence, social unity and integration broke apart between the various castes, and an old order of life was systematically deconstructed. As part of this process, the four elements of the caste system detached from their former state of seamless integration, and each level came to express its own autonomy and independence from its counterparts. Ultimately, all four levels need each other, but in the Kali Yuga, the collective psyche splits, and each level comes to compete against its counterparts for power and influence over the social order. For example, the mass labor strikes and populist democratic movements of the late 19th and early 20th centuries were efforts on the part of the labor caste to win better rights and privileges for itself. These movements were primarily directed at the ruling oligarchy, which is comprised of a consortium of interests drawn from the aristocratic caste situated one level above. Here we find society's different caste levels competing and jockeying with each other for influence and power. The psyche of the collective social organism has become split, and as a result, the social order is disunited and inharmonious, its inner elements warring and battling with one another. In the post-war era, within the structure of American empire, this still disunited four-tiered caste system evolved into a new pattern of self-organization. Here, a new entity rose to take control of the state or warrior caste, and this is what I've been calling the Technocratic Superstate. As a consequence of its arrival, the entire social order was transformed, though few within the lower castes, such as the labor caste or the oligarchy, were aware that this had taken place, or at least to the extent they weren't aware of the extent to which this had taken place. With the coming of technocracy, a scientific approach to governance is adopted, and scientists rise to take control over the state, usurping it from the hands of the capitalist oligarchs where it had previously resided. At the apex of the technocratic superstate is an elite body of scientists, which form together a think tank. This think tank is responsible for engineering the social order along a certain trajectory of development, while at the same time managing a hidden empire of black projects dedicated to secret scientific and technological research. The aim here is to develop the infrastructure for a new age of global civilization that is to one day come into existence. So this technocratic superstate was formally born within America in the years after World War II, with the story of its rise conveniently masked and covered up by the onset of the Cold War, which was carefully engineered into existence over the same time period. In the decades since its initial founding, the power and reach of this technocratic superstate has grown considerably. Its instruments and assets now extend throughout society at every level. Its primary vehicle of transmission is the U.S. empire, which it has been steering and guiding since World War II. As we covered in the previous article, the U.S. empire works primarily through the petrodollar economic order, which is run by a network of capitalist institutions that remain under the oligarchy's formal control. But these oligarchical institutions, while important to the U.S. empire's horizontal dimension, are disconnected and kept aloof from what's going on in the deepest recesses of its vertical dimension, i.e. the Black Projects world. In this way, the Black Projects shadow realm exists as a caste apart, and is the domicile of the entity I call the Technocratic Superstate. The operations of the Technocratic Superstate are concealed within the highly secretive compartmentalized matrix of Black Projects being run within the inner realms of the U.S. national security state. At the core of the Black Projects world is a central think tank, which functions as the technocracy's central brain. From this brain is suspended a lower nervous system-like network of outer appendages, which extend throughout the anatomy of society's outer institutional structures. This network communicates information from the central think tank to the outer body of society and vice versa, in the same manner that the nervous system facilitates a flow of impulses moving both into and out of the brain. Within this central scientific ruling body is concealed something else, a fourth caste, one the ancient Indians called the Brahmins. This caste is comprised of elite philosophers, initiates, and sages who rule over the technocratic superstate in an initiatic mystery school style fashion. This fourth caste operates as a secret society, one whose lineage dates back to the old mystery schools of pagan civilization. In more modern times, its lineage stretches from the Templars up through Francis Bacon's Rosicrucian order. Each played host to modern incarnations of the mystery schools. In his book New Atlantis, Francis Bacon, a master alchemist drawn from this elite caste of initiates, revealed the mystery school's vision for how it was to operate in the coming scientific age. In older times, the mysteries manifested within the structure of man's religious institutions, with its orders of initiates drawn primarily from the body of the temple priesthoods. Now, in the scientific age, the mysteries would reconstitute itself in scientific form, with its new body of initiates drawn primarily from the technocracy's scientific networks. Bacon calls this new scientific age version of the mystery schools the Invisible College. He also gives it other names, such as Solomon's House and the College of the 6 Days' Work. In his vision, the initiates of this elite college were to dedicate themselves to the task of scientifically investigating the metaphysics of cause. This means studying the alchemical mysteries of etheric energy. Since this field of energy is the unified matrix that supports all physical form, its internal dynamics causing physical bodies to emerge within the realm of material existence. In other words, bodies are effects, and this energetic matrix is the cause. So cause and effect. As Bacon articulates in his short story New Atlantis, the Invisible College's operational mandate was not only to study the science of cause, but also to develop technologies based on its understanding, ones that could be then charitably applied for the good of the world. More specifically, they were to be applied as part of a great reformation effort, one aimed at transmuting the base elements of world society into the fulfillment of a new golden age. As we covered in previous chapters, the mystery school Francis Bacon was involved with establishing in England, his Rosicrucian Order or Invisible College, was brought over and installed within America at the very beginning of the British colonization effort. Once established in America, this secret society worked to inscribe Bacon's vision for a new Atlantis into the very soul of the country, thereby bestowing upon it a secret destiny from the very beginning of its existence. Since then, this secret society, set up now in America, has pursued Bacon's grand vision with dedication and patience, chipping away at it bit by bit at incremental stages. A major leap forward toward achieving the ultimate ends of its plan took place after World War II, when the Technocratic Superstate was set up. Almost certainly, Bacon's secret society worked to set it up as the new chosen outer vehicle that the Invisible College would now work through to fulfill its mission to create a new golden age. For the duration of the scientific age, the mysteries will remain in this chosen institution. It is now the primary domicile of it. Initially, back during the Revolutionary era, a time that predates the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, the esoteric orders had been set up to work through a different outer vehicle, the Freemasons. During Francis Bacon's lifetime, a global network of Freemasonic societies was set up and utilized as the chosen vehicle for the mystery schools, existing then under the guise of his Rosicrucian Order, to conduct its outer worldly operations through. During the Revolutionary period, this Masonic network was leveraged to great effect as part of the greater Rosicrucian Order's mission to overthrow the twin tyrannies of church and crown and replace them with a new paradigm built around science and democracy. After this battle was won, world society quickly transitioned into a new age, the age of science and industry. In this new age, the Rosicrucian Order needed a new outer vehicle to work through. The Freemasonic Order had proven valuable during the Revolutionary era, but this had taken place back before the ages of industry and science had really taken off. Now that they had, a new outer vehicle was needed, one specially tailored to the new institutional environment that was coming into formation. The Technocratic Superstate was set up as a solution to this problem, fulfilling all the core needs of Bacon's secret society as it worked to navigate mankind through this new age of science and industry. In essence, the Technocratic Superstate is a forward progression of the old Masonic Order. By means of this new outer vehicle, the Invisible College, or the mystery schools, would be empowered to make significant new advancements in its quest to fulfill Bacon's vision for a new Atlantis. In short, this apex secret society, the Invisible College, or the mystery schools, is the real hidden hand, the true power player on the world scene, the top caste that rules over all others, including the technocracy. The outer vehicle this hidden hand works through is the Technocratic Superstate, which, like society as a whole, is organized into various specialized sectors and tiers. In this new social model, initiates of the mystery schools set the mandates, And the technocratic superstate's job is to implement them to the best of its ability. This it does through the structure of American oligarchy and American empire. The whole structure is still being put together. It is still growing and evolving through time toward its perfect or ideal form. Consequently, its various levels will not be fully complete and integrated together until such time as world civilization is formally established. Until then, the collective psyche will by definition remain split and the caste levels unintegrated. Putting all this together, what we see emerging into place over the course of the 20th century is a new governance system, one which restructures and redesigns the inner dynamics of mankind's archetypal four-tiered caste system. At the apex of the modern world order is Francis Bacon's Invisible College, a secret society possessing mastery over the alchemical mysteries of etheric energy. This secret society, uses its knowledge of alchemy not only to develop world-changing technologies, but also, and even more importantly, to perform a great alchemical work of transmutation upon the collective body of human civilization, one aimed at bringing about a new golden age as its ultimate result. So that's the top level. Below this apex secret society and extending around it is the technocratic superstate, which exists something like the nervous system and is ruled by a central scientific think tank, which forms its brain. Various branches extend out from this think tank, stretching out into and taking gradual control of society's numerous other sectors and levels. The three primary missions of this technocratic superstate are A, to develop a portfolio of secret breakthrough technologies, B, to maintain secrecy, order, and control, and C, to pursue global empire so as to establish the foundations of world government. The primary social sector that the technology works through in accomplishing these three mandates is the oligarchy, which over the course of centuries has amassed control of society's political and economic institutions. The technocracy works through this oligarchy much like how the Invisible College works through it. It uses it as an instrument to fulfill its own long-term strategic goals. And then finally, at the bottom level, the oligarchy is the caste that interfaces most closely with the fourth and lowest caste, which is the outer body of public society. The labor caste, in other words. Officially, in the West, this lower caste is organized as a republican democracy, but in reality, its democratic institutions have been co-opted by the oligarchy. In sum, the lower labor caste is primarily ruled over by the oligarchy, and the oligarchy in turn controlled by the technocracy, and the technocracy is ruled over by an elite secret society, which is the outer body of a mystery school. Until the day when global government is officially established, these four levels will remain disunited from each other, with each lower caste being largely unaware that a superior caste is controlling it. It is only once global government has been achieved that the existence of this entire structure can be revealed. And once it is revealed, it can transparently be reintegrated together once more, just as it originally was in the heyday of old Atlantis. This reintegrated global civilization is the promise of the new Atlantis, where the collective psyche will overcome its current phase of psychic splitting and will once again be holistically reconnected. So that's the end of that section. Once again, that was called the modern caste system. And so this is like basically the core of the approach I've been using to analyze, world history, is that it's not just a story of a sequence of events, and it's not just a story of these great individuals who sort of shaped the world, but actually it's the story of this sort of design structure evolving into new forms of expression. And this design structure, by that I mean at the largest levels, this caste system and how they interplay together and how each caste is sort of manifesting through a particular type of form. And so that's really what world history is all about. It's this collective structure of moving and evolving through time. And, as individuals in our lives, we sort of act out this restructuring. The drama is played out through us, but the real focus of things is on the collective. So that's sort of the approach I'm using. All right, let's move on to the next section. It's called the Technocratic Superstate, and here we're going to go further into this third caste level, and this is the entity that controls the Black Project's empire that exists deep within the U.S. national security state. All right, the Technocratic Superstate. The four-tiered caste system described above was cemented into place within American society upon the conclusion of World War II, after elite elements within the U.S. military command harvested Nazi Germany's highly secret Kammlerstab program and replicated its operational parameters back home. With this event, a new technocratic superstate was born, this being the permanent off-the-books think tank tasked with building out a secret arsenal of black weapons projects within America. Ever since this point, this technocratic entity, at root a scientific institution, has served as the U.S. national security state's central ruling power. The Kammlerstab program within Nazi Germany was formed as an initial prototype for this new entity, a secret technocratic institution dedicated to developing a hidden arsenal of deeply classified technologies, ones that, at the most elite level, are based on the idea of harnessing the alchemical mysteries of etheric energy. After the war, elite U.S. intelligence agencies discovered this top-secret Nazi R&D program and harvested it, replicating its operational parameters back home. In this way, they came to create an Americanized version of it, and in the process gave birth to a permanent technocratic superstate as a result. This technocratic superstate is concealed deep within the opaque structure of the U.S. national security state. From this hidden position, situated at the apex of U.S. empire, its networks extend around the world, where they work to engineer world society toward the fulfillment of a new age of global government. At its core, the technocracy follows a scientific ideology. This makes sense, as the main reason for its existence is to serve as the custodian of a secret portfolio of scientific projects, ones technological in nature. The technocratic superstate was established as a permanent scientific institution, one dedicated to monopolizing a now classified paradigm of physics based around the old alchemical idea of the luminiferous ether. In practice, this means that the technocracy has been put in charge of carrying out a permanent Manhattan Project-style research program, one dedicated to the pursuit of exotic, occult-inspired engineering concepts. The scientific expertise developed by the technocracy through this research work is leveraged in order to fulfill three core missions. And I mentioned these, but I'm going to keep reinforcing them. So these three missions are the development of a secret arsenal of world-changing ether-based technologies, the creation of a world security grid to protect its monopoly over these technologies, and the engineering of world society into a pattern that will one day allow for these technologies to finally be publicly revealed and put into active use. Once this technocratic entity was formally established within the heart of the U.S. national security state, an event which took place right after World War II, all three of these operational mandates were inscribed into it. It immediately began pursuing these, and as a result came to instantly exert a transformative influence over the trajectory of world society. What we have seen over the past 70 years is the continuous growth and development of this global technocratic superstate, one that feeds off the spoils of American empire and whose power base resides in the nebulous inner realms of the U.S. national security state. From this lofty position, it quietly directs the trajectory of world events, gradually re-engineering the social order into the structure of what will one day become a global civilization. The governance model that technocracy uses to centrally manage the world system is based on the concept of regulatory governance, where an elite technocratic think tank formulates an all-encompassing network of legally binding regulations that the rest of society must adhere to. It is by controlling the regulatory framework of society that the technocratic superstate is able to engineer large-scale changes to the global system. Through this means, it gradually sets about re-engineering the world order into a new paradigm of existence, one global in sweep and featuring a new suite of world-changing energy technologies at its core. Researcher Patrick Wood, who has written extensively about technocracy's governance model, traces the origin of the concept back to the early 1900s. This is fitting, since this was the time period when ether physics first began being written out of the public record, and also when the secret project to establish a world cartel system was first commenced. By now, it is clear that the world cartel system was always intended, since day one, to be eventually linked up with a global technocratic superstate, one possessing monopoly control over the paradigm of ether-based physics. It is therefore no coincidence that while this world cartel system was being established during the pre-war period, ether physics was simultaneously being written out of public textbooks. In his research into the history of technocracy, Patrick Wood highlights the work of W. King Hubbard, one of technocracy's early advocates, who defined technocracy back in the 1930s as the marriage of science, government, and economics. He viewed it as a new governance paradigm rooted in the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. This is a quote from him. For the first time in human history, government will be done as a scientific, technical, and engineering problem. So that was the vision of technocracy set up before the war. So the vision was set up before the war. The world cartel system was set up before the war. The war itself was engineered into place, as we covered, partly by means of this world cartel system, meaning the military industrial complexes of all the nations involved in World War II were actually linked together at a deep level. The Bank of International Settlements and the sort of global central banking system, that was already set up before the war. So everything was set up for this technocratic superstate to come into existence before the war, and then the events of the war set the stage for the birth of this entity to take place. So getting back to Patrick Wood, he emphasized that this new paradigm of technocracy, quote, proposed a completely different economic system that had ever been implemented before in the history of the world. It was to be a system run by scientists and engineers who would make decisions based on their application of the scientific method to control both social and economic matters. In the vision of technocracy, he writes, price-based economics with its proven laws of supply and demand would be replaced with an energy-based system controlled by the distribution and consumption of energy. In this approach, a scientifically regulated global energy network serves as the basis for essentially managing the global economic system. A single scientific body, the technocracy, is put in charge of governing the whole operation. In this way, it becomes empowered to essentially control and manipulate the levers of global society, thereby enabling it to engineer the trajectory of world development. The famous 20th century imperial strategist Zbigniew Brzezinski is another key figure who has written extensively about the significance and importance of technocracy's appearance on the world stage. In his book Between Two Ages, he states that the emergence of technocracy represents, quote, the gradual appearance of a more controlled and directed society, one that emerges as an evolution beyond the liberal democratic order. And the new paradigm of governance that technocracy represents, society becomes centrally controlled and, quote, dominated by an elite whose claim to political power would rest on allegedly superior scientific know-how. Unhindered by the restraints of traditional liberal values, this elite would not hesitate to achieve its ends by using the latest modern techniques for influencing public behavior and keeping society under close surveillance and control. Brzezinski also emphasizes how society's shift into technocratic governance results in an increasing amount of integration developing between different social sectors. He writes that our age is moving toward a new pattern, blurring distinctions between public and private bodies and encouraging more cross-participation in social issues. Overall, technocracy emphasizes a governance model built around an engineering approach, using the methods, instruments, and techniques of science in order to accomplish its overarching governance objectives. In practice, its model of governance works as a vast social engineering enterprise, with its goal being to optimize society according to a scientific rationale. In order for the technocracy to govern society in this manner, it needs access to a comprehensive data stream about what is going on in society and how energy and resource inputs are used within it. The scientific method is premised upon data. Therefore, the technocracy must have a steady stream of data about society in order to take a scientific approach to governing it. Here's where the idea of an information control grid comes into play. One of technocracy's key elements is that it features a vast data gathering network. This network exists for two reasons: to ensure the security of the technocracy's hidden arsenal of technologies, and to accumulate vast reservoirs of data about human activity, which are fed into scientific models and used as the basis to carry out a vast social engineering campaign. This social engineering program is implemented upon the outer sectors and levels of society through the aforementioned mechanisms of regulatory governance, which targets public and private organizations alike, coercing each, through legally binding regulations, to conform to a pattern pre-specified by the technocratic superstate. Researcher F. William Engdahl offers further elaboration on what the new governance paradigm of technocracy entails. Here, the objective is to measure and then model ever-increasing sectors of the global economy, as he tells us. This is accomplished using increasingly sophisticated econometric tools, the purpose of which is to describe and map the global economy and its total energy requirements well into the future. By accumulating, analyzing, and modeling data gathered from every sector of society and analyzing it at an aggregate level, the central think tank at the core of the technocratic superstate is able to develop a unified model of the workings of the total social organism. Based on this model, it then formulates a body of regulatory policies which are designed to move the total system from one phase of collective functioning to another. In this way, a greater social engineering agenda is able to be achieved. In many ways, the story of the 20th century is that of the birth and growth of this technocratic superstate within the body of American empire. The first half of the century set the stage for its creation, and the end of World War II marked the point of its formal birth. Since its initial emergence, it has advanced rapidly to become the central power player in world affairs. The story of its emergence has been masked under the guise of the Cold War, and yet this emergence did happen. Today, from its hidden perch at the apex of the U.S. national security state, the technocratic superstate has risen to become the primary instrument of governance responsible for maneuvering world society through the highs and lows of the scientific age. The world order it has worked to create is one where everything is digitized, the internet reaches everywhere, data tracking is ubiquitous, global society is thoroughly integrated, and everyone is dependent on technology. These are components in a larger grand strategy, one this technocracy has steadily worked to implement in order that it may one day bring about a formal system of world government, one ruled by scientific principles. The technocratic superstate was born from a seed and is still growing toward the fulfillment of a final design state. It has not yet achieved this final ideal form, consequently it is still in a process of becoming, and therefore is not yet operating at an optimized level. The technocratic superstate has never been fully optimized for the reason that it has been forced to maintain the twin mandates of secrecy and compartmentalization for the entire duration of its existence. As long as this remains the case, technocracy cannot be optimized because the scientific worldview that it is supposed to govern its operations is one that must be compartmentalized, with key scientific truths veiled from lower sectors. Only the think tank at the core of this system has full access to the complete spectrum of scientific knowledge obtained thus far by man. The rest of society, from the lower branches of the technocratic superstate to the oligarchs to the outer public, is not privy to this full system of knowledge. Therefore, an imperfect and flawed understanding of science must perpetuate throughout society, with an imperfect social order arising as the result. The problem originates in the need to keep certain occult aspects of its knowledge base secret. In order to ensure this secrecy, a worldview perception management campaign must be enacted upon the lower sectors of society to ensure they only know what they need to know in order to fulfill their respective tasks in the technocracy's larger global mission. Only once the final end state of world government has been achieved will the core scientific truths that the technocracy has been hiding be finally made available so that all of society can at last operate with one integrated understanding of scientific knowledge. Until then, the technocracy must continue to conceal certain key secrets and to maintain a highly compartmentalized system of science within society, one that strategically offers different conflicting teachings to different groups so as to confuse and disguise certain occult truths, such as the ever-present existence of etheric energy. The fact that the majority of people in society must operate without access to the true doctrine of science, being left instead with a deliberately flawed and incomplete materialistic paradigm, is a situation that negatively affects society's capacity to function in an integrated and coherent manner. This is the price of secrecy. To preserve secrecy, the collective psyche must undergo a psychic splitting, with the various component castes, classes, and social sectors that comprise it, each functioning with a fragmented and incoherent concept of reality. The national security state's use of classified knowledge and its policy of project compartmentalization serve to perpetuate this state of affairs, ensuring that none save an elite few can perceive reality in a coherent way. Until a formal system of world government can be set up, these twin policies of compartmentalization and secrecy must remain in effect. The price of secrecy must continue to be paid. The collateral damage resulting from this state of affairs is what we find playing out in real time all around us, with the COVID situation being a paradigmatic example of the babel of confusion that secrecy and compartmentalization have created. Once again, this situation cannot and will not be successfully addressed until a formal system of world government is established. Until then, we must continue to cope with an incoherent and disunited understanding of science. The mandate for secrecy necessitates that this is so. All right, that's the end of that. So that was called the Technocratic Superstate, and now we're going into more details about what the system is, how it works, and what the sort of early analysts of this system said about it, going back into the 1930s. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, that quote I gave from him, that was from the 1970s. All right, so now we're going to go even deeper into it. And now we're going to look at this whole situation with black budgets and black projects. So that's going to be the focus of the next two sections, actually. So this next section is actually called Black Budgets for Black Projects. All right, picking things back up. Black budgets for black projects. After a long period of preparation, the birth of the technocratic superstate took place rapidly. The context was the completion of World War II, when elite factions within the U.S. military command harvested and replicated within its structure the parameters of Nazi Germany's top-secret Kammlerstab program. Once this happened, the technocratic superstate was formally born and enthroned at the heart of America's military-industrial complex. As previously discussed, the technocratic superstate was tasked from the outset with fulfilling three core missions: to develop breakthrough technologies, to create a world security grid, and to engineer a world empire that will set the stage for world government. Clearly, a permanent technocratic superstate with a mission statement like this would require copious amounts of funds and resources to operate. Furthermore, because its existence would need to be kept secret, its funding base must also be kept secret. Therefore, if this technocratic superstate really did come into existence after the war, its birth would coincide with the creation of a secret system of finance, one specially intended to finance and support a permanent covert empire of black projects. As it turns out, a secret system of finance did in fact come into existence after World War II. It was set up after the war by elite elements of the U.S. national security state, its funds being sourced from the hidden troves of wealth originally stolen and compiled by the German and Japanese armies during the course of their wartime operations. The covert off-the-book system of finance that resulted from America's capture of this hidden pool of wealth is one that is designed to operate in parallel with the overt petrodollar economic order being put into place by America's imperial machinery. The purpose of this secret financial system is to fund and supply the build-out of the permanent black projects empire being controlled by the technocratic superstate. The marriage of black projects with covert sources of funding, i.e. black budgets, was an innovation originally pioneered by Hans Kammler's top-secret R&D unit within the SS, i.e. the Kammlerstab. Describing the situation in greater detail, Joseph P. Farrell writes, quote, "In the spring of 1944, Hitler approved of Himmler's proposal to make the SS permanently independent of the state budget. He wanted to secure a position for the SS that would keep it independent of the state and the party. In other words, Hitler wanted to create a black budget, doubtless in an effort to mask the vast weapons research being conducted within Himmler's SS." So you see, this is the basis of this situation. I mean, the whole prototype for this operation, this technocratic entity I'm talking about, like all the core components of it were developed originally in Nazi Germany, and then they were brought over to America almost wholesale. The whole thing was just replicated. The model was already in existence, so the whole thing was just had to be replicated at home. And this includes this idea of funding this entity with off-the-books black budget sourcing. So this art had already happened in Nazi Germany, and so now it was just happening again in America with this new American-born version of it. So after the war, when the Americans harvested Kammler's secret think tank and replicated its parameters back home, one of the key elements they recreated was this off-the-books financing approach, i.e. the use of black budgets. In its use of black budgets to finance black projects, America had a major leg up on its German predecessor. Unlike the Third Reich, the post-war American empire possessed hegemonic control over the world's financial system and economic order. This, combined with the hidden pool of money it confiscated from the German and Japanese armies, allowed the American deep state to engineer a black budget system that was essentially bottomless. Thus, at the very moment the technocratic superstate was being set up within America, a system of black budget funding was also being established, its goal being to finance in perpetuity the build-out of this secret technocratic entity. There are two levels to this hidden system of finance: an upper level derived from the confiscated access loot that is completely off the books, and a lower level comprised of an elaborate system of black budget covert operations. These are designed to systematically suction money out of America's imperial petrodollar economy and funnel it instead into the secret world of black projects. The main difference between these two levels of black budget funds is that one is completely hidden and self-sustaining, while the other leaves traces of its existence and relies on funds vacuumed out of the overt economy. So you see this black project empire, this secret operation, has two sources of funding that are both secret and covert. One is completely secret and covert, and that is this off-the-book system derived from the stolen wealth accumulated by Access powers. And then you have one that's in this intermediary realm because it's secret, but yet it has some interface with the overt economy. So there are some trails of it. But basically, this second system is the black budget system, and this is designed around these operations that are vacuuming money out of the overt economy and redirecting it into this black projects empire. So there's these two sources of funding. One area where traces of black budget operations can be found is in the illicit money flows that move into and out of black markets of various types. Here, illegal and therefore untraceable money streams are washed and laundered through Western banks, which are linked into these black budget operations. The global drug trade is one major example of this type of black market / black budget operation. For decades, vast quantities of illegal drug money have been harvested by the black budget and redirected into the coffers of black project operations. Evidence of a vast black budget operation can also be seen in the vast amounts of missing money that have disappeared from the accounting ledgers of government agencies. Over the decades, the total amount of money that has disappeared in this manner adds up to a staggering sum. Financial analyst Catherine Austin Fitts estimates it to be as high as $21 trillion. This has been taken out of the outer economy and relocated into the black projects world to be used for who knows what. Beyond both the drug trade and the missing money, both of these elements of the black budget, there is that other factor, the completely off-the-books financial system, the one derived from the captured access loot. No one knows how big this system is or how many resources and how much wealth it has been able to funnel into the black projects world that's controlled by the technocratic superstate. As discussed earlier, the origin of this hidden pool of money comes from the vast fortune that America seized from Germany and Japan after the war. This fortune originally being fashioned from the stolen wealth of conquered European and Asian nations during the war. After the war, American intelligence agents unearthed this vast reservoir of wealth and took control over it. Once they did, the decision was made to keep it secret and separate, at least from the overt financial system. In other words, the upper echelons of the U.S. national security state decided to use this inheritance to create a secret slush fund which could finance and supply all manner of covert black projects on a permanent basis. Clearly, this secret slush fund was used to finance the build-out of a permanent technocratic superstate of the type we've been describing. Once formed, this technocratic superstate would take on the responsibility of maintaining a monopoly over the world's development of ether-based technologies. To accomplish this goal, it had to keep its own ether-based R&D programs secret and safe, which it did by disguising them around a host of other black projects, many unrelated. So this is something that we also saw with the Kammlerstab program, that it had just all kinds of programs that it was funding, but the real special ones, the ones that cared the most about, was sort of hidden within this matrix of activity. And so that's one of the ways that the secrets are disguised and maintained. And then meanwhile, while it's funding all these projects, it's also working to build out the architecture of a world security and information control grid. These are likely the two foremost programs responsible for consuming a majority of black budget funds: secret technology and expansive security. So now let's pause and consider something noteworthy and important. And this is something I think gives away the idea that this was a engineered operation. The creation of this technocratic superstate was a planned thing. Because think about this. the crucial elements America needed in order to create for itself a permanent secret technocratic superstate, which the two elements are an operational prototype and a source of funding. Both of these were inherited by America after war's end at basically the exact same time. These elements fell so perfectly into America's lap, it seems to me as if the whole thing was planned and coordinated at some secret level from the start. Is this whole situation not a bit suspicious? How could all of this have come about as a coincidence? Everything the US needed in order to create and hit the ground running with its own Kammlerstab style program, in other words, a top secret off the books technocratic superstate, was handed right over to it after the war, almost as a gift. All the Americans had to do was put the ready-made formula together and poof, instantly they would be in business, with the foundations of a new technocratic governance regime all set up and ready to roll. So that's the end of that section. Once again, that was called Black Budgets for Black Projects. And we're going to be developing all of this further in the next section, which is called the Black Budget Economy. But I hope with this discussion so far, you can see that the parameters of this superstate that I'm talking about were all inherited by America right after the war, including, amazingly, this entire pool of accumulated money that was completely off the books that the Axis powers had built up as a result of stealing it from all the nations that they were occupying and controlling during the war. So they stole all this wealth, and then they never didn't get a chance to do anything with it, and then America comes along and just takes the whole thing, keeps it secret off the books, and therefore creates a secret slush fund, and so that happened at the exact same time that American intelligence agents were moving through Europe, discovering all these secret projects that the Nazi S.S. were working on underground, and then harvested the leadership of that program, took the whole operational parameters that they were using and just replicated it back home. And then they have this money that comes right into their lap that's ready to finance this. I mean, the fact that these two things came together is just impossible for that to be a coincidence. And then there's a bunch of other lines of evidence that I've been talking about that point to the fact that this was created, this sort of like secret government system, this technocracy. And so this happened all after World War II, but it was clearly set up in advance, and like the way it formally came about is such a fantastic story that the whole thing had to be planned and engineered. So anyway, let's move on. I'm going to be talking about this stuff more in this next section. So this is called the Black Budget Economy. All right, the Black Budget Economy. Having introduced the basics of the Black Budget and discussed how it fits into a larger framework of geopolitical history, let's now go into further details about how it operates. The Black Budget system operates in the middle space between two parallel financial systems, the overt petrodollar economy and the covert hidden system of finance existing behind it. Thinking in terms of the horizontal and vertical axes of American empire that we discussed above, we discover that the petrodollar system is primarily used to finance the horizontal build-out of America's covert world empire, while its secret twin, the hidden parallel financial system, is used primarily to support the vertical build-out of the secret black projects empire that the technocratic superstate is controlling. In between these two realms is the black budget arena, which vacuums up money and resources from the overt economy and redirects it into the financing of covert black projects. Some directed back toward the advancement of America's imperial agenda around the world, others toward the build-out of a global information control grid, and still more for the financing of secret technologies like UFOs. This intermediary realm of black budget funding is the primary source driving the fraud, graft, corruption, and money laundering that characterize the modern petrodollar economy. These have become so commonplace within the global economic system that one can only conclude that they are intentional features built into it. The three main avenues that black budget funds are sourced from include A. Systematic financial fraud, such as that which now prevails during the bubble economy phase of modern finance, a phase we've been stuck in for decades now. B. Money laundering activities derived from the global drug trade and other illicit black markets, which the U.S. deep state is heavily involved in orchestrating, and which its banking system is designed to help launder and plunder. And C, accounting misallocations within government budgets, in which vast sums are simply disappeared from the public accounting records with no explanation. Black budget funds obtained in this third manner, through accounting trickery, alone result in trillions of dollars disappearing out of official records, where it lands instead in the bank accounts of private defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, these being the entities responsible for operating America's secret portfolio of black projects. The entire economic system has been re-engineered to support America's secret empire of black projects. What this implies is that the core institutions we typically associate with capitalism, banks, corporations, government regulatory agencies, are ones that are no longer driven by an economic logic. Rather, they have become instruments of a deeper social engineering agenda, one being carried out by the technocratic superstate. So this is a critical point to understand, is that the Federal Reserve, the monetary policy that we have, the system of industry that we have, none of these things exist. I mean, as is obvious, none of these things exist in order to, optimize the economy. So you could say that, these things exist really just to make oligarchs rich. But I think that that's a byproduct of a deeper truth, which is that these arenas of capitalism are actually just instruments now in a larger social engineering scheme. And so that's how we have to understand it. Everything is run out of the national security state, the military industrial complex. Everything is run essentially out of that because that's where all the most powerful technologies are. And that's where all the information gets centrally funneled into. Not just financial information, but also, internet data and things like that. So we actually live in a very centrally managed society, and we don't really live in a capitalistic system. So we have institutions of capitalism, but those are just instruments in a centrally managed social engineering paradigm. And so this truth explains why fraud, corruption, and non-accountability have become such prominent features of the modern economic order. These are necessary elements for the black budget operations, which themselves are a necessary part of maintaining a hidden technocratic superstate. Researcher Joseph P. Farrell comes to a similar conclusion, writing that the black budget system, premised as it is on obtaining secret and unofficial sources of funding, is the ultimate, though hidden, source of the public culture of corruption so prevalent today. That's what he writes. The industrial scale system of fraud that the black budget economy is responsible for perpetuating is one that is too big to fail, as we now know, meaning its existence is protected for national security reasons and will continue so long as this national security rationale remains. In short, the preservation of the black budget economy and all the illicit operations that come together to fund it are deemed necessary evils. And so these necessary evils are tolerated so that the ultimate agenda of the technocratic superstate may one day be fulfilled. That's basically why we have this too big to fail policy, because it's serving a larger goal. But the goal is secret, and the need for secrecy is one of the main reasons that we have the system that we have. It's not just because a global engineering situation needs to be pursued, because that can be pursued in different ways. But it's the need to combine empire with secrecy that is the real source of the shadow activities that we see, and all these corrupt policies and programs, is because to maintain secrecy, these levels at a certain point, which are not at the apex, they don't know what the whole plan is, but you create a space where certain activities and stuff are going to, in this shadow realm, are going to take place. And these likely don't have anything to do with the grand goals of the larger entity, but they have to be tolerated because, number one, to fix them would be to reveal the fact that there is something more secret that's engineering the whole system. But on another level, it's almost like, these things also serve to all these sort of black projects, operations, that especially the ones involved with the black budget financing. These all serve to funnel money into this black budget world, and so that paradigm is what is valued, not the individual projects that are, preying upon the lower caste of society in an extractive manner. I'm not talking about, those exist because of this space of secrecy exists. It's not that the existence of these kind of evil programs is the goal. I think it's looked at more as like an externality or a necessary evil, because you can't change that without undoing the secrecy. So you're sort of caught in this position where, like I was saying before, the system runs in a non-optimized manner, and it has to, as long as secrecy and compartmentalization are necessary components. And those can only be undone once the final end goal that the technocracy is working towards, the global government, is established. And then you can correct these evils. And so, all right, let me return to things here. At almost every level, the modern social order has been re-engineered to support the technocratic superstate's triple mandate of empire, secrecy, and hidden technology. This includes the economy. Long ago, it stopped being run by an economic logic and is instead run as a component of the technocratic superstate. Its motions are now governed by an elite caste of scientific planners who wield it as an instrument in their larger social engineering campaign for world government. Therefore, we should understand that the purpose of our economic order is not to optimize growth or prosperity, it is to support the agenda of the technocratic superstate. And this will remain the case at least until such time as the technocracy's grand social engineering agenda is finally achieved and world government created. Then a new world order can be born, one not handicapped by the same mandates of secrecy and empire that America has been tasked with. The fragile, derivative-laden, corruption-infused, petrodollar-centered financial order we have today is premised upon an unsustainable, too-big-to-fail bailout policy, one that makes no sense keeping alive from an economic standpoint. But this system is invaluable to the technocratic superstate, and therefore it makes perfect sense why this zombie system has been kept alive with a perpetual, too-big-to-fail government guarantee continuously backstopping it. The modern economic system is terrible for building wealth and prosperity, but perfect for building out empire, while simultaneously facilitating the vacuuming up of wealth and resources from the overt petrodollar economy into the covert black budget world. This is why we have a too-big-to-fail policy. The financial system cannot be allowed to fail or reset, since the entire architectures of both the global American empire and the inner technocratic superstate that runs it are entirely dependent upon its perpetuation. This situation also explains why there has been no accountability or justice for those involved with perpetuating the fraud, money laundering, and corruption that is now endemic to the financial system. These illegal and harmful activities cannot be stopped, nor their perpetrators held to account, because the U.S. national security state needs the illicit streams of money this system provides in order to finance its hidden matrix of covert black projects. Over the decades, the full amount of money that has been vacuumed out of the overt petrodollar economy and into the coffers of the covert black projects world is a sum that runs well into the trillions, perhaps as much as 21 trillion, which is the figure financial analyst Catherine Austin Fitts and economist Mark Skidmore pinpointed back in 2017. In a 2018 article in Fitts' quarterly publication, The Solari Report, Skidmore details how, soon after he and Fitts together unveiled their findings about the 21 trillion missing money from government accounting books, he states that the DoD announced that it would conduct its first ever external independent audit, which it then failed. The DoD's response to this failed audit reveals something important: that the systematic financial fraud it has been involved with perpetuating is an operation directly linked into the Black Project's world being centrally managed by the technocratic superstate. As Skidmore informs us, in response to the audit, quote, concerned that it would reveal sensitive information, Pentagon officials officially turned to the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board, or FASAB, for advice. Several months into the audit, FASAB posted a new document called FASAB 56, which recommended that the government be allowed to misstate and move funds in order to conceal expenditures if it is deemed necessary to protect national security interests. conveniently, the federal government accepted the FASAB recommendation on October 4th, 2018, which was just in time for it to be applied to the financial statements generated by the DoD audit. So basically, Fitz and Skidmore made this report in 2017 that indicated that as much as $21 trillion has gone missing from government accounting books. And then a year later, the DoD announces that it's going to do an audit, which I had never done before. And so maybe the two were inspired. Maybe the DoD audit came from this report by Fitz and Skidmore. So then, while this audit was taking place, the DoD turned to this federal accounting board to be like, oh my gosh, what can we do? We can't let this audit find all this secret activity that we've been financing. And all this secret, activity is what caused it to fail the audit. But in the process of the audit happening, the Federal Accounting Standards Board recommended that it be allowed to misstate and move funds in order to conceal expenditures. And so this became the new policy that happened as a direct result of this audit. And so basically what that does is that institutionalizes this black budget system just permanently. It's operating all throughout the government, and there's no even attempt to conceal it anymore because you're able to manipulate the books however you want. So anyway, Fitz and Skidmore emphatically warn how this new regulatory document, FASAB 56, represents a truly landmark piece of legislation, one that institutionalizes the black budget economy as a permanent feature of U.S. government. They explain that the new federal accounting rules specified by FASAB 56, quote, override the last 230 years of U.S. Constitution and financial management laws and accounting conventions. This policy allows approximately 1,170 federal reporting entities to shift amounts from line item to line item, and sometimes even omit spending entries altogether in their financial statements, if, quote, national security purposes make it necessary to avoid revealing classified information. Fitz states what this means directly, writing, quote, essentially the federal government has adopted an accounting and public reporting policy that allows a small group of unelected individuals with security clearances and need-to-know access to information to engage in secret processes to establish and maintain separate sets of classified secret books in most federal agencies and component entities. It also allows members of this group to purge from publicly available financial statements anything the group deems to be worthy of national security protection. But there's more. As a further component of this new accounting standard, quote, the National Intelligence Branch of government has the authority to exempt companies from standard reporting requirements as well. Again, investors and the general public have no way of knowing which companies have altered financial statements. In short, what this means is that the greater part of the U.S. securities market has now effectively gone dark, as they put it. It also means that from this point forward, the federal government will keep two sets of financial reports. One modified and useless, set for the public, and one true, a true accounting book that will remain undisclosed. So that's what we have right now. That was set up in 2018. So that's what we have right now. In addition to the systematic accounting fraud described above, another major source of black budget funding that we've mentioned is that involving illicit black markets, such as the global drug trade. There are numerous well-known examples that tie the global drug trade directly to covert projects being run by the CIA and other secretive intelligence agencies. The famous Iran-Contra scandal of the Reagan era is one example, as is the related Dark Alliance conspiracy unearthed by journalist Gary Webb, and this conspiracy connected the crack epidemic in Los Angeles with CIA-sponsored covert black projects being run in Latin America. Researcher Peter Dale Scott provides other examples, even going so far as to conclude in his book, The American War Machine, that, quote, U.S. backdoor covert policy, foreign policy, has been the largest single cause of the illicit drug trade and of the drugs flooding the world market today. In his book, Scott goes in depth on two examples of this, Vietnam's Golden Triangle and Afghanistan's Golden Crescent. Here, covert intelligence operatives backed the rise of violent drug cartels, which they controlled and used as a means to supply the world's illicit heroin market. This lucrative black market was then mined as a resource for black budget financing, this latter aspect of the project being the whole reason for its existence. Notably, the two covert black budget operations being run in these countries are ones aligning exactly with the waging of major U.S. war campaigns. The Vietnam War in the 60s and 70s and the war in Afghanistan waged during the O's and the 10s. Clearly, so important was the black budget financing obtained from the illicit markets in these countries that entire wars would be fought to ensure their perpetuation. Giving further evidence to the fact that the U.S. deep state is behind the global drug trade, Scott writes that, quote, in 2003, according to the United Nations, these two areas, Afghanistan and Vietnam, accounted for 91% of the area devoted to illicit opium production and 95% of the estimated product in metric tons. Add in Colombia and Mexico, two other countries where the CIA has worked with drug traffickers, and the four areas accounted for 96.6% of the growing area and 97.8% of the estimated product. In the case of Vietnam, he writes that when the CIA airline CAT or CAT began its covert flights to Burma in the 1950s, the area produced about 80 tons of opium a year. In 10 years' time, the production had perhaps quadrupled, and at one point during the Vietnam War, the output from the Golden Triangle reached 1,200 tons a year. By 1971, there were also at least 7 heroin labs in the region. And in the case of Afghanistan, Scott writes that, quote, Afghan opium production had been even more responsive to U.S. operations in the area. It soared from 200 metric tons in 1980, the first full year of U.S. support for the drug trafficking, to 1,980 metric tons in 1991. Then, in 2000 to 2001, the Taliban virtually eliminated opium production in their area of Afghanistan. Thus, total production for 2001 was cut back to 185 metric tons. Nearly all of this was from the northeastern corner controlled by the drug trafficking Northern Alliance, which in that year became America's ally in its invasion. But once again, production soared after the U.S. invasion in 2001, in part because the United States recruited former drug traffickers as supporting assets in its assault. From 3,400 metric tons in 2002, it climbed steadily until in 2007, Afghanistan produced an extraordinarily 8,200 tons of opium, becoming practically the exclusive supplier of the world's deadliest drug, and at that time it supplied 93% of the global opiates market. So this was Afghanistan while America was controlling it. In sum, the deep state's need to obtain black budget funding leads it inevitably to pursue illicit and illegal funding streams, these being derived from 3 primary pathways: financial corruption, accounting fraud, and the engineering of black markets. This corruption system arises as an inevitable consequence of the threefold mandate that the U.S. national security state faces: secrecy, empire, and secret technology. These mandates result in the emergence of a non-transparent, parasitic shadow realm within society, one where all kinds of covert shadow activities thrive unchecked, feeding off of and blocking up the flow of energy and resources that should be moving unimpeded through the social ecosystem. This shadow realm emerges as a necessary consequence of America's policy of keeping its global empire unofficial and thus secret. This necessitates that many, if not most, of the covert operations it runs to maintain its empire are ones requiring black budget funding. Wall Street corruption, government accounting fraud, and black markets like the drug trade all come together to supply the large, steady revenue streams necessary for supplying this black budget and the matrix of black projects it supports. Joseph Farrell agrees and adds to this point, writing that, quote, so long as the need for secret research continues, then so long will the need to maintain a fraudulent system of finance to support it by force of arms if necessary. This implies bluntly that a move to a, quote, free market or open system of money is an impossibility, since such a system would comprise the integrity of the secrecy of the technologies being developed. To put it succinctly, secret technologies cannot be financed by non-secret and open sources of funding. Ultimately, it is this triple need for secrecy, empire, and technology that keeps this shadow realm open and thriving. This situation cannot and will not be resolved until a new world order of global government is officially reached and moved into. Until then, for national security reasons, America must keep this covert black budget/black project system in place. If transparency and accountability were allowed, not only would many unsavory aspects of America's covert economic empire be revealed, but transparency would also reveal the contours of the secret technology programs it has been hiding. This is information that cannot and will not be let out, as it is detrimental to America's national security interests at a fundamental level. Therefore, for national security reasons, transparency can never be allowed to take place, nor can these black budget programs be allowed to stop, at least not until such time as the US empire can be transitioned into a formal system of global government. Then and only then can the secret shadow elements of America's empire be finally revealed and successfully addressed. So that's sort of my take, is that, none of this can be fixed until we actually have that move into the global governance situation. Because until then, secrecy and compartmentalization have to be kept paramount. All right, so that was called the Black Budget Economy, and now we're moving into the last section. This is a short one. It's called the Kennedy assassination, and we're going to look at how some of these themes tie into the Kennedy, what Kennedy was involved in, and what got him killed. And then this will be the last one, and then after this we'll be moving into part 2 of this, which will be in a separate episode. And again, that one's specifically on the topic of UFOs. All right, the Kennedy assassination. The U.S. empire's desperate dependency on the corrupt black budget economy described above is made clear with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. He was murdered by a coalition of interests within the U.S. national security state, who saw him as an existential threat to the continuation of their secret empire. Joseph Farrell has written much on the subject. In his book, Covert Wars and Breakaway Civilizations, for example, he explains that President John F. Kennedy managed during his short term in office to outline policies that clearly threatened a number of well-entrenched and very powerful interests that many believe to comprise elements of America's establishment or secret government. He continues, Kennedy had, for example, circulated a national security memorandum after the Bay of Pigs fiasco that effectively turned all paramilitary and covert operations over to the Pentagon, wresting them from the CIA. He had further vowed to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces. For those people like Allen Dulles, Kennedy was taking a direct aim at the fiefdoms of bureaucratic power that had been nurtured since the end of World War II. And with the memorandum, he had scored a direct hit. Kennedy further threatened the existence of America's secret black budget economy by taking on the Federal Reserve and its monopoly control over the U.S. financial system. This he did by attempting to issue debt-free money independent of the Federal Reserve's control. As we now know, the American financial system can never be changed for the reason that it is the centerpiece of U.S. empire, both in terms of the overt petrodollar world order it manages and the covert black projects matrix its national security state protects. Consequently, Kennedy's threat to dismantle the system and bring it back under the control of America's formal democratic institutions made him an enemy of practically the entire hierarchy of the U.S. deep state. Elaborating on the situation, Farrell informs us that, quote, there are a cluster of actions that Kennedy took to mobilize the deep state against him. One of them was an attempt to dismantle the national security state and end the Cold War, but perhaps the most flagrant was his attempt to issue debt-free money independent of the Federal Reserve System. Much as Abraham Lincoln did when he avoided dependence on London bank loans to finance the Civil War and instead issued interest-free U.S. Treasury notes, or greenbacks, to finance the war, President Kennedy mandated the U.S. Treasury introduce new money into circulation. In all, Kennedy brought nearly $4.3 billion in U.S. notes into circulation in $2 and $5 denominations. The $10 and $20 United States notes were just in the process of being printed by the Treasury Department when Kennedy was assassinated. They were never circulated. It was the first time since Lincoln that a president had issued interest-free money and the first time a president had challenged the sole money power of the private Federal Reserve. Unsurprisingly, after JFK's death, no more silver certificates were issued, and those that had been issued were removed from circulation. The very existence of this executive order was hidden from the public and forgotten or ignored by most historians. Kennedy was assassinated because he had begun running up against the contours of a vast secret superstate, the dimensions of which he could scarcely guess at, it being outside of his need-to-know security clearance. Not being read into the critical national security implications of America's secret black projects empire, Kennedy made deliberate moves designed to bring control of U.S. affairs back under democratic institutions. Of course, this threatened the security of the hidden black projects matrix contained within the U.S. national security state. He therefore became seen as an existential threat to every entity operating within this world, from the CIA to the Federal Reserve to the technocratic superstate itself. This is why he was assassinated, to preserve the architecture of a hidden imperial superstate, the contours of which are still invisible to us today. All right, so that's the end of the article. And the theme here is the technocratic superstate and all that goes into creating it and how it was created and what it means and how it fits into a larger social model that has to do with this caste system setup. So in the next article, we're going to be focusing more on the fourth level of this caste system, the secret society aspect, and we'll look at how it interfaces with the technocratic superstate by means of this UFO situation. So that's next. Please stay tuned. And until then, God bless, and thanks for tuning in. This is Alex Sack, and once again, the Wisdom Tradition Podcast. Take care.